need to know that spirit is there. You're not really alone. You need to know that there's other people who actually go through what you go through. You need to understand that there's a way to get to the next day. Whenever you are getting to that point where you feel like the pain or like the sadness or the isolation is way too deep, like, you know, those feelings where you just feel like the pain is not healing. A lot of people experience this whenever they're going through a breakup or when someone leaves out of their life. Usually it comes from some sense of separation. So in these moments, it's really easy to kind of forget your connection with God. It's really easy to not focus on strengthening it because you're so focused on the hurt that you're experiencing. And there's a scripture that I feel like is so perfect for this understanding of like how to really bring yourself out of that, because it can be tough. So the scripture is Psalm 73:26. For my flesh and my heart faileth, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. So this scripture is so powerful because it's basically saying my flesh can't do what I needed to do. It's not at the point where it's going to be sustainable to help me through this trial or tribulation that I'm going through. However, the Spirit of God, leaning on that, my heart can be uplifted. My heart can go on. And that's important to understand, because sometimes we forget that just because you are human, just because you are reading the word, just because you are practicing becoming a better person, does not mean that you're not going to have times where your flesh is too weak to stand up to what life brings your way. But this is where you have to remember, and this is where studying comes in, understanding that you can lean on spirit to get you through a lot of those hurdles in life. So this is like another analogy that I wanted to like merge with this. I used to run track in high school and in middle school. And during training, we would do a lot of conditioning, because obviously if you're running hurdles, you could be running a short distance, but it's more than the average length because you're jumping over something as well. And so we would do a lot of like conditioning, and I did not like running long periods of time. I like sprinting. I like getting it over with. And I used to have a trainer, and he would tell me to kick it in, which means like, let's go, like put in extra effort, whenever I would feel the monkey on my back. So the monkey on your back is that feeling where when you're running, you get to a point where you can't go anymore. Like your muscles literally feel like they're locking up because of the lactic acid buildup. And it's a way for your body to know that it's hit its stress point. But it's also that moment where the weak stop, but the mentally strong are the winners. So it's the part that breaks most people. And so he would say, once you feel that monkey on your back, you got to kick it in. That's when you really start to run. That's when you really start to kind of take yourself out of what you're feeling physically and rely on your mind to carry you through. So I use that analogy to say, when you're going through situations that your flesh can't handle, when you're going through situations where the wound that you're going through emotionally, sometimes physically or emotionally, when it's too much and it seems like it's not healing, that's when you have to lean on that. That's when you have to lean on something outside of you, or something that's stronger than you, which in this case would be God, the Spirit. But it's the same thing in sports. That's when you rely on your mindset to take you further. It's simple, but this is not something that is easily practiced when you're actually going through it. When you're going through it, you need people around you to remind you, or sometimes you need to hear something. And in my case, reading certain things, like the scripture that I posted, like when you know that that's a thing, it can remind you to lean on that, because you forget, oh yeah, I may need to lean on something from time to time. I can't do it on my own. Especially when you are going through things where you're by yourself, when you are physically alone, you need to know that spirit is there. You're not really alone. You need to know that there's other people who actually go through what you go through. You need to understand that there's a way to get to the next day. There will be times where you're going to feel very lost or just kind of like disoriented in what life throws at you, especially if you are starting to move up. You're going to notice that you'll have certain attacks, spiritual attacks, and those are the times where you have to remember the whole point of this. God is the whole point of all of this. And so when you can train your mind to build that relationship, not just when you're going through something, but when things are good, when things are bad, when things are just stagnant, you have to learn to ask God to build that relationship, learn to understand how God works, ask God to show you, to understand who he is. So when you go through those moments where it really is like a tough situation in your life and you're laying down and you don't know what to do next, you can ask for God to remind you of that sense of covering that he will provide, that calmness, and you'll feel it. It's like it's a sense of not worrying anymore. It's a sense of clarity. Even if you don't know what to do next, you have a sense of clarity and calmness that just overtakes you. And those are the moments where you have to just allow God to hold you in his arms so that you can make it to that next moment of when you have to start to pick up the work, because we can't all do it on our own. It's impossible. You have to rely on God sometimes, or all the time, but you have to ask for that. Sometimes you can't just rely on your spirit. You have to rely on the spirit, the spirit of God. You have to rely on something else because you can't handle it on your own. And that's okay. But you have to know that. If you don't know that, you're going to go through things much harder than another person would go through it. Understand that if you are working on your relationship with God, you have insurance to lean on if something really hits the fan. Okay? And I really want you to understand that, because it's a really powerful thing to know, and it's very comforting. Very, very comforting. You need to know that you can cash in on all the work you've been putting in spiritually. Okay? So that's the video for today. Keep growing, keep progressing, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay? Bye.